I'm Elise Carter. I'm 36, and for the past 12 years, I've lived and breathed secure network architecture. If you've ever paid your taxes online or filed a government form in the state of Washington, chances are my code helped protect your data. At 11:42 a.m. last Thursday, I got fired. It wasn't overperformance. It wasn't budget cuts. It was because I refused to delete a digital footprint tied to a client scandal. My CEO didn't say it in those words, of course. He said I was out of alignment with strategic goals and that cultural cohesion was paramount moving forward. Corporate poetry for Get Out, You're a Liability. That morning started like any other. I was debugging a permissions protocol for Athena, our flagship system. The coffee in my mug was lukewarm, my inbox was bloated, and I had 5 meetings ahead of me. By noon, I was carrying a cardboard box past security with 2 plants, 3 framed certificates, and a flash drive that no one remembered existed. It would be funny if it weren't so cleanly executed. They waited until just before the lunch rush, so the office would be half empty. HR had the paperwork ready. My badge was deactivated before I even stepped into the elevator, and a junior associate I had trained 6 years ago escorted me out like I was dangerous. The whole thing was done with that smooth, sterile cruelty companies like to pretend is professionalism. Here's the part they didn't know. I built Athena. Every layer, every countermeasure, every kill switch. The bones of that system have my fingerprints all over them, and not just metaphorically. The security kernel runs on a logic protocol that I designed alone late at night, during a time in my life when sleep felt optional and purpose came in lines of code. When they fired me, they assumed they were cutting off a resource. What they actually did was trigger a sequence I'd written years ago, back when I still believed this company was worth protecting. A silent protocol buried 15 layers deep, programmed to wake up only under very specific conditions. One of them, the removal of the lead system architect without proper offboarding. In other words, me. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I shook the CEO's hand, signed the exit form, and even thanked the HR rep for her time. But inside, my mind was already counting backwards. 90 minutes. That's how long the system has before it begins isolating its core processes and locking out all unauthorized modifications. By the time they realize what's happening, they'll be staring at firewalls they can't decrypt and system demands they don't understand. The truth is, I never wanted revenge. I wanted respect. I gave this company 12 years past on higher salaries and turned down offers from bigger names. I stayed because I believed in the mission, in the tech, in building something that mattered. But if they see loyalty as weakness, then fine. Let them learn what strength looks like when it's been betrayed. They fired me before lunch. What they didn't realize was that by doing so, they handed me the very leverage they feared I had, and I intend to use it. The meeting wasn't on my calendar. That should have been the first red flag. When the CEO's assistant asks if you can drop by for a quick sync, it's never good news, especially when you're halfway through documenting a vulnerability patch that could prevent a federal compliance issue. The conference room was colder than usual. Brian, the CEO, was already seated with 2 legal advisors and the head of client relations. No introductions, no pleasantries, just a laptop already open to a set of system logs I knew by heart. The ones tied to an access breach from one of our highest-paying clients, a client under investigation. He asked if I could clean up the noise. That's what he called it. Noise. As if deleting traces of unauthorized system access was like muting background static. I asked him to clarify. He didn't flinch. Just leaned forward and said, "The regulators don't need to see everything. Only what's useful, what's clean, what's safe." My mouth went dry. I remember that vividly. The way the silence wrapped around the table while everyone waited for me to agree as if it were a routine maintenance task. I said no. I told him flatly that tampering with logs in an active audit was not only unethical, it was criminal. He gave me a look like I'd just failed a loyalty test. The next 24 hours fell off. Meetings I was supposed to lead got canceled. Team leads stopped looping me into development threads. By the following morning, my credentials were restricted. No access to Athena's core modules. No updates pushed through my account. That's when I knew the decision had already been made. My refusal wasn't just inconvenient. It made me expendable. But I wasn't angry yet. I was stunned. The company I'd helped build was asking me to be part of a cover-up, and when I refused, they made me the problem. They didn't want a leader, they wanted a quiet accomplice. And when I said no, they started preparing my exit. They thought I'd leave in shame. What they didn't expect was that I'd already written the rules they were about to break. Athena wasn't built by a committee. It didn't come out of a think tank or some flashy Silicon Valley incubator. It came from my apartment over too many sleepless nights and cold takeout dinners, written line by line by someone who cared more about protecting people than padding profits. When the company acquired my startup, they thought they were buying software. What they got was a living system, one with layers most engineers would never see, protocols buried so deep. Only I knew how they truly worked. I kept that knowledge quiet, not out of paranoia, but because I knew what kind of shortcuts people take when they think no one's watching. I embedded a failsafe. Something simple, elegant, hidden. A self-verification logic is buried beneath the last security layer. It monitored not just external threats, but internal behavior. If it detected tampering from privileged accounts or attempts to override compliance logs, it would silently switch modes. Athena would stop accepting commands from anyone who didn't pass a biometric pattern tied to my original encryption key. It wouldn't crash. It wouldn't send alerts. It would simply go quiet, locking the core modules and rerouting access to a secure escrow shell. And unless you knew it was there, you'd just think the system hit a bug. No one ever asked how Athena knew when to escalate. They were too busy selling it. I never told anyone. Not my team, not the board, not even the CTO who took credit for its public launch. It was my last insurance policy, something I built for the day someone tried to use Athena for the wrong reasons. That day came faster than I thought. And while they fired me thinking they'd silenced the voice of reason, they actually triggered the one part of Athena they never even knew existed, the part that doesn't obey power, the part that obeys purpose. My purpose. I didn't say a word as I walked out of that building. No scenes, no threats. Just a quiet exit, my bag on my shoulder and my badge already deactivated before I reached the lobby. But inside Athena, something had already started moving. The failsafe was live triggered the moment my credentials were stripped without a proper off-boarding sequence. The system had switched to surveillance mode, silently logging every internal access, every override attempt, every line of code touched by the people who thought they had won. They didn't know they were on the clock. That was the moment they forced me out. A 90-minute countdown had begun. I built it that way on purpose. Give them enough time to get comfortable, to assume control, to dig their own hole deeper before the bottom drops out. From my apartment, I logged into a separate system, not Athena itself. That was sealed. This was a shadow interface linked to the protocol I'd embedded 3 years ago. It didn't control Athena, it simply watched. And what I saw was exactly what I expected. The CTO or whatever intern they'd rushed into my role had already tried to override my master admin path. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 came seconds later when someone accessed client logs and attempted to edit entries. The system recorded it all. Time-stamped, IP-tagged every keystroke fed into a secure chain of custody I controlled. 83 minutes left. They thought they'd buried the threat when they fired me. What they'd really done was give it permission to surface. I watched the dashboard light up like a Christmas tree, each alert a silent flare, warning them they were walking toward a cliff. And not one of them could see it. They had no idea the walls were closing in, that every attempt to take control was just feeding the system more evidence. I didn't need to lift a finger. Athena was already doing the work for me. All I had to do was wait. The first sign came 37 minutes into the countdown. A strange sequence hit the outer layer of Athena's shell. Sloppy but aggressive. Not the kind of mistake a company engineer would make. Someone was trying to brute force a back door. I smiled. They'd brought in outside help. Probably someone who called themselves a freelance security consultant, but got paid in crypto and had no problem skipping legal lines. Brian must have panicked fast to go that route. The irony was delicious. He thought he could fire me, then hire a hacker to tear down what I'd built. But the door they were kicking wasn't real. It led to a honeypot. A perfect mirror of Athena's architecture built specifically to catch people like this. Every attempt to access it triggered background scans. I saw everything: device IDs, keystrokes, data packets, and even the Wi-Fi fingerprint they logged in. One of them worked from a condo in Bucharest. Another routed through a VPN in Toronto but forgot to disable microphone permissions. Within 20 minutes, they thought they'd broken through. The fake Athena loaded clean, accepted their patch, and displayed a staged dashboard. They started copying files, downloading what they assumed was source code. The system tagged each IEP, logged every transfer, and silently phoned home with every packet. I watched as they celebrated in their little chat group. They called it client recovery ops, like it was a job, like they were doing something noble. One even posted a crypto wallet screenshot to prove the payment came through. That's how I got Brian's burner account. Direct link. $30,000 were wired 3 hours after I was fired. That was all I needed. I packaged everything. The access logs, the crypto transactions, the chat messages, even the fake code they were trying to compile. I dumped the whole bundle into an encrypted drive and sent it to my attorney. One copy went to the cybersecurity unit at the DOJ. Another went to a journalist I trusted. No explanations, just data. Let them connect the dots. They still thought they were ahead, thought they had control. Meanwhile, I was watching them drown, quietly, elegantly, and most importantly, on record. Long before Athena was a product, before it had a name or even a line of code, it was just an idea scribbled on a whiteboard in my mother's kitchen. I was 24, fresh out of grad school, and terrified of how vulnerable our systems had become. My mother, always the realist, looked at my sketches and said if I was going to build something that ambitious, I'd better protect it properly. We didn't have much. She was recovering from her second round of chemo, and the bills were stacked taller than our fridge. But we had a lawyer friend from church who helped us incorporate. Morgan Systems, LLC. She was listed as the principal, not because I didn't want the credit, but because I needed a layer between me and the wolves I knew would come once Athena started working. When the acquisition offer came in from the company that would eventually fire me, I didn't sell them Athena. I licensed it. On paper, it looked like a full transfer of rights, but buried in the terms page 72 of the agreement was a clause that restricted ownership. The license would remain active only so long as I was employed in a technical leadership role. That clause was my parachute. My mother's name on those filings was my shield. And for years, no one bothered to check. They got lazy, comfortable. They assumed that if I was still there, they owned what I built. They were wrong. The moment I was fired, the license lapsed. That's why Athena began to shut down. Not just because of the failsafe, but because legally, the company no longer had rights to the code. Every line, every patent, every architecture decision reverted back to Morgan Systems. Back to my mother. She never fully understood the tech, but she understood trust. And she understood what it meant to be used and discarded. She'd spent most of her life raising me alone, working 2 jobs, battling cancer more than once. When I asked her to sign those forms 10 years ago, she didn't even hesitate. Just smiled and said she hoped she'd never need to know what they were for. Now she did. I called her the afternoon I left the company, told her what had happened. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She said something I'll never forget. Then they don't deserve what you made. She was right. For years, I protected that company like it was mine. I poured my best ideas into a system they never fully valued. They saw Athena as an asset, a sales pitch. I saw it as a legacy. A chance to do something right in an industry obsessed with shortcuts and surveillance. That's why I never gave them full control. That's why I kept the core buried beneath layers of access they couldn't reach. Because I wasn't just protecting code, I was protecting my intention. And now, thanks to one careless termination meeting, the company had cut itself off from everything it needed to survive. Not because I sabotaged it, but because they never bothered to read the fine print. They thought they owned me. They forgot who actually signed the patent. The first news alert came through while I was folding laundry. Athena had gone completely dark across all environments. Clients were locked out, internal dashboards frozen. No one could get in, not even the system admins. The article called it a catastrophic failure. I called it justice on schedule. Within hours, the stock price nosedived. Investors scrambled for statements. Tech blogs speculated on insider threats. Cybersecurity forums lit up with theories. But no one knew the full story yet. Not until I decided to give it to them. Brian tried calling me. 5 missed calls, then a text that just said we need to talk. He must have realized that everything they'd done, the firing, the hack, the breach, had backfired in the worst possible way. He didn't want help. He wanted rescue. And I wasn't interested in saving the man who tried to bury me. I didn't reply. I forwarded the data packet to my attorney. All of it. Access logs the payments to those hackers, the forged compliance records, the internal memos about silencing whistleblowers. My attorney said the evidence was nuclear. Then I sent a copy to the same journalist who once begged me for a quote about Athena's security protocol. I told her now would be a good time to run that piece. By nightfall, it was everywhere. Headlines on every major outlet. Anonymous sources close to the engineering team confirmed the lockout. A leaked memo showed the board scrambling for options. One publication even printed a partial transcript of a meeting where Brian referred to me as a liability with an attitude. I framed that one. It felt earned. I didn't feel sorry. I didn't gloat either. What I felt was clean, clear. Like something had finally snapped into place after years of being twisted out of shape. The system I built had done its job. It protected itself when no one else would. And for the first time, I didn't have to explain or defend it. I just had to let it speak. And it did, loud and unmistakable, on my terms. The call came 2 days after the story broke. It was from an old investor who had backed my first startup long before Athena had a name. He said he always knew the system was worth more than the people who tried to control it. He offered me a deal. A clean slate. Full ownership of Athena, a new company built around it, and the freedom to lead without compromise. He wanted me to choose the team, the mission, the future. And he promised one more thing. My mother's medical bills covered completely and permanently. I didn't answer right away. I sat with it. Let it breathe. I walked through the apartment, touched the server case that still sat under my desk, and thought about every sacrifice that had led me here. I didn't need revenge anymore. I needed space to build, space to breathe, space to matter again. So I said yes. The old team came back one by one, not because of money, because they remembered what it felt like to build something that wasn't just about scale or margins, it was about doing it right. I named the company after my mother's middle name. Small tribute, big meaning. Now I sit in a glass-walled room overlooking a quiet office, my badge clipped to my hoodie, and a whiteboard already filling up with ideas. This time, I write the rules. And if I ever forget why I started, I've got a reminder one floor down where my mother's getting the care she deserves. I didn't win by being louder or faster or meaner. I won by holding the line, by staying honest. And in a world that rewards shortcuts that might just be the boldest thing anyone can do.